90 to 95% of Americans will claim to have read the entire Bible word for word. But as we would go on with the survey, we would discover that if they were reading it word for word from cover to cover, then they didn't assimilate a whole lot, because we developed a follow-up question: can you name 4 books of the Bible? And we discovered that this vast majority of Americans that claim that they've read through the entire Bible couldn't even name 4 books of the Bible, let alone 4 of the 10 Commandments. So what we have here in America is a perception that we know things a lot better than we really do, and I've been informed that's exactly the way it is in mathematics and science and history and the rest. Surveys have been done where they ask American students how well they think they perform in mathematics compared to students in other nations of the world, and American students always place themselves at the very top of the list, even though objective testing shows that we place 12th or 13th in the world. Well, maybe it's not surprising we're seeing the same thing happening at a biblical level. As a result, it's not uncommon for me to run into people at universities who will say that they're rejecting the Christian faith because Genesis teaches that the world is flat, even though there's not one bit of data in the book of Genesis on the shape of the earth. They can't quote chapter and verse. So that's the first problem. You have to get them into the text and see what's going on. Now, the problem with this perception that Genesis chapter 1 is giving us a scientific absurdity with respect to the order of the creation events is the failure to appreciate the point of view or the frame of reference. If you misplace the frame of reference for the Genesis creation account, indeed you get a scientific absurdity. If you claim that the point of view is up here in the heavens with God above the earth telling us what's taking place on the surface of the earth in the 6 days of creation, then indeed you have the plants created long before there's the heat or the light of the sun to support the health of those plants. And I would agree, if Genesis was teaching that, then no one should pay attention to that page or the rest of the Bible. The Bible is that incorrect on the sequence of the events that we see in the scientific record, and we shouldn't trust it for any message at all. But the truth of the matter is, Genesis chapter 1 verse 2 clearly states the frame of reference for the creation account before it describes the 6 days of creation. The Spirit of God is moving or brooding over the surface of the waters. And so the frame of reference is not up here in the heavens, but rather below the clouds on the surface of the waters. Now, having established the point of view, as the text declares in the 2nd verse, as the surface of the waters, suddenly the creation account of Genesis 1 transforms from a scientific absurdity into one of the most powerful arguments that the Bible indeed is the error-free Word of God. How so? Well, first off, we have the statement of the heavens and the earth. And one thing about the Hebrew language, it's got a very tiny vocabulary. And so, especially when it comes to the nouns. And so Hebrew nouns do double, triple, even quadruple duty. The Apostle Paul made note of this, and he talked about being taken up to the 3rd heaven. And in Genesis chapter 1, we see 3 different definitions for that single word heaven. That's also true, by the way, for the Hebrew word for day. But in the beginning, God creates the heavens and the earth. And the Shamayim or Retz there is a compound noun that when the word for earth and heavens is hooked together, it can only mean the entire physical universe. So Genesis 1:1 tells us that there was a beginning when God brought into existence the entire physical cosmos of matter, energy, space, and time. Then the focus of attention moves from the universe down to the surface of the waters, and then we get into the 6 days of creation. And from that perspective, we realize that we move from the creation of the physical universe not to the creation of light. You know, the skeptics have looked at the first creation day and says that's talking about the creation of light. No, the light was created in the beginning when God created the universe. What we see in the first creation day is not God claiming that He created light. It simply says, let the light be, using the Hebrew verb hayah, the verb to be. The light was there already. What happens on that first creation day is that God transforms the atmosphere so that light for the first time can pass through from the heavens, the sun, moon, and stars, to the surface of the waters. Now, astrophysicists recognize that all planets begin with opaque atmospheres and that our primordial solar system had a very heavy debris cloud that would also help prevent the passage of sunlight to the surface of the waters. And therefore, this atmosphere would be transforming from an opaque condition to a translucent condition. And so now light can pass through. But it's translucency, a lot like the neighborhood in which I grew up on coastal British Columbia. You know, we saw the sun for a few hours every year. The rest of the time the skies were translucent. Light passes through, but you can't see the objects responsible for the light. It's not that God created the sun, moon, and stars on the fourth creation day. It's that the objects were now visible for the first time to an observer on the surface of the waters. Why? Because it was at that point in the chronologue that God transforms this atmosphere from a translucent condition to a transparent condition. So for the first time, this observer on the surface of the waters can actually see distinctly the objects that are responsible for the light that's been coming through the atmosphere since the first creation day. And by that means, we see that the order of creation events that are claimed in the text is as follows. The atmosphere is first transformed from opaque to translucent. The second creation day, we have waters established below and waters established above, referring to the surface of the waters. So we have liquid water in the ocean below and water vapor in the atmosphere above. And one of the conditions for life on the land is that there must be a stable water cycle. Then we move into the third creation day, where continental land masses begin to appear. And the geophysicists now recognize that the planet begins with a big watery ocean, but plate tectonics and volcanism will cause continental land masses to pop up above that ocean mass, and that plate tectonics and volcanism will cause the land masses to grow until they're balanced off by erosion, and that takes place at the 30% level. And it's been stable for the last couple of billion years. So you have the formation of the land masses. Then we have the production of plants on the land. And this has led to considerable theological debate. What does the text mean? It uses the verb dasha, let the land produce plants. And the debate has been as follows. Does that verb dasha mean that the plants are being produced on the land by natural Darwinian type processes? Or does it mean that it's taking place through direct divine creative intervention? I've listened to both sides of the debate, and my response to that is that it could go either way. The verb dasha allows one to interpret the text either way, which means you're not going to answer that question theologically. It's going to have to be answered scientifically. My opinion on the scientific evidence is that you do see some of both going on for the plants, less of it for the animals in terms of natural process, Darwinian type processes, being able to produce new species of animals. But for the plants, it's obviously happening more frequently. If for no other reason, we can see it in real time. Then the atmosphere is transformed from translucent to transparent. That process, by the way, will establish a nice thick oxygen envelope in the atmosphere and an ozone shield, which will permit the existence of active advanced animals that are going to need that oxygen and that ozone. We also, through the visibility of the sun, moon, and stars, have the means to regulate complex biological clocks. And on the fifth and sixth creation days, those are the creatures that are being focused on in the sequence, beginning with the charrettes, swarms of small sea creatures that one could classify as creatures as complex as simple as mollusks and more complex. Then we have on the fifth creation day the sea mammals being created. And incidentally, it changes the word from production, dasha, to asa and bara. Now these are two terms that would not accommodate Darwinian type processes. It does require direct divine intervention to fit the meaning of those Hebrew verbs. However, these are a different kind of creature. Unlike creatures that God was bringing into existence before, either through His direct hand or natural processes, these are creatures that are not merely physical or bodily.